Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second chapter of Linux shell scripting. And in this chapter, we'll see how we take input from users on the command line and how we use if conditions in shell scripting. So let's start with taking input from users and use them in our scripting. So let's write a simple script. Let's start with hashbang /bin/bash echo enter a word, for example, read, and read is what takes input from user. Echo, you entered reply. So note this reply here. This is a shell built-in variable, and exit 0 is optional. You can do that, or you can simply end the script without exit 0. Exit 0 simply gives the shell exit status of 0, which means it's successfully executed. So let's write it. And we have to change the user permission of the file. Now let's run the file. So enter a word. I'm going to say test word. It says you enter test word. So you can have a little space here just to beautify it. And run again, word test2, you enter test2. So now we took the input from users, which is test2, a word, and we use that input in the shell scripting. So in this example, we didn't supply any variable with the read command. So we used shell's built-in reply variable and use that in our script. We can also try using a variable name. Let's say, for example, we can do read and give a name of the variable, our variable, let's say. So now let's save and run the script. Enter word test, you enter nothing. So what happened is we define a variable here, but we didn't call this variable here. And that's why we didn't get any output. So now let's change this reply to our variable that we defined and save it. And now run and test. Now we got this result. So we entered the variable, capture that variable into our variable, which is this variable, our variable, and call that variable to print the input from the user. And if you want to print the $, you can use, let's say, let's try one line here. Let's not exit the script and say burger cost $5 or $4, whatever. I'll save it. Burger. So you enter burger and burger cost, and there's a blank because, so in this case, this is expecting a fourth parameters. Like for example, do 9 space 8 space 7 space 4. So now we supplied 4 parameters, and then it's gonna print burger cost $6 because 6 is the fourth parameter. So burger cost 6. But if you want to print $4, then what you have to do is you have to use escape character, and -e allows you to use that escape character, backslash. Now save it and run without these arguments. Let's do pizza this time. So it allowed us to use or print this $ as text instead of the arguments supplied on the command line. We can also take user input and print the line using read command instead of echo command. So if you have a lot of lines in your script, that will shorten your number of lines. Let's see that example. Let's do nano 021. Read. May I ask your name, for example? And in this case, we define variable is the name, and we just print echo hello name. Exit 0 optional, but good practice to have. Now change the permission of the file. User execution and run the file. John, just simple like that. We took user input and stored them in the variable and later display the value of that variable. And now we are going to try a condition using if. And for that, let's start another script. Nano 022, for example, sh. So you have to be a little careful with the syntax. If, and there should be a space, square bracket, and let's do and space one more time. Less than, I'll explain this to you. 1 space bracket. And if you're going to continue on the same line, you have to use semicolon, space then, or you can simply do then, and there's no semicolon. Echo uses first cell script name and name. Exit 1, there's an error. And now we close the if condition with fi. Unlike other programming languages where you use curly braces. Hello. First argument. Exit 0. Now let me first save this and I'll explain this to you. So in this case, what we did is $has, it prints the number of arguments that we supply in a cell as argument. LT is less than. If number of argument is less than 1, you just print this message. This simply means, so $0 is the name of the script itself, and 1 is the first argument, 2 is the second argument, like we saw in the first chapter of the cell scripting. So if your argument is less than 1, which means 0, if there's no argument, then you just print the message saying you have to use the argument, which is the name, for example. And you just exit 1 means the command was not successful, exit status 1, and close the if condition. And if this condition is not satisfied, meaning if you supply the argument, you simply print hello and the name of the argument. So let's run this script. So we didn't supply any argument. This condition was satisfied. So it printed uses script name space, and it asked me just enter any name. And now we're going to supply argument. For example, Umes. It says hello Umes because we supply the argument. So $pound is not less than 1, it's actually equal to 1. So this condition didn't satisfy. Since this condition didn't satisfy, it came here and printed hello, and $1 represents the first argument, and it just printed that. We can also try printing what's the value of pound here. See, number of argument is 1, and 1 is not less than 1, so it didn't satisfy, so it came here. If you supply multiple argument, this changed because now number of argument is 2, but it still printed first argument because that's what we told in the script. Just print the first argument. And you can, let's look into the same command, but with different variation. LE is less than and equal to, less than or equal to. Now, if your argument is only 1, then this condition will still be satisfied because then this will return value 1. So if 1 is less than or equal to 1, then it will satisfy this condition and it will not execute this one. So let's see. Let's only supply 1 argument. So the number of argument is 1. Still going to print this message because we use condition less than or equal to. But if we supplied 2 arguments, now our value, this is going to be 2, and it's going to print Pumice because that's the first argument. There you go. I think you got an idea. Now we can try if and else. So if total number of argument is less than 1, then we take the input, enter a name, and store that name in name variable. Else, whatever is the first argument, if there's an argument, we store that in name variable, close if condition, and we simply print that variable. So if there is no argument, then we ask to enter a name, and if there's an argument, then simply store that argument as a name and print that name variable. So let's run without the argument. It asks us to enter a name because the first condition satisfied. Hello, miss. Let's simply read that first. So this condition satisfied. Now we are going to enter argument. So this will fail. And that argument will be supplied and stored in name variable and simply print that name. So in this case, $1 represents first argument, John, and printed that variable here. And we can also compare the string using if condition. Let's try another script. If one string space is equal another string, then strings are identical, else strings are not identical, and close the if condition. So in this condition, if one condition satisfies, print this one, otherwise print this message. Strings are not identical. And if we go here and change this to capital A, strings are identical. You can also do let's see. Escape character greater than, then let's do first string is greater than second string, or else first string is smaller than second string. It will actually use the ASCII value and compare the ASCII value. So in this case, it should be the greater. So the first string is greater than second string because ASCII value for lowercase a is greater than uppercase a. So if we try -GT here, let's see what happens. So basically that expression is only for integer expression. And since this is a string, it is not behaving in the same way. So simply change it to greater than sign. Now what we could do is we could input two numbers and compare that number using if condition. Number, let's store that number 1. Now we create a condition if number 1 is greater than number 2, then we are going to display first number is greater than second number, else first number is smaller than second number. So in this case, we're taking input from user and compare that number and display the result. First number 45, second number 44. First number is greater than second number. First number 30, second number 50. First number is smaller than second number. It is very simple and basic, and we're just trying to see how if condition and if else condition works in shell scripting. And using if condition, you can also test if there is a directory that you want to see if it exists or not. So if we make a directory, let's say test. Now let's write one script. And directory name is, so my home directory scripts test. If -d is to test directory if it exists. Directory name, then echo directory, this directory exists, else directory does not exist. So directory exists, and let's rename the directory with test2. So now that directory is test2, and if we run the script now, oops, not that one. Does not exist because it couldn't find the test directory. We changed the name to test2. So this is how we can use if condition to test if directory exists or not. You can also combine two conditions using and or in if condition. For example, scripts test2 name is another variable. You can simply say John, for example. If directory exists, which is this one, and -n. So -n actually tests if the value of a string is 0 or greater than 0. So in this case, second variable, then echo the directory exists and the name is not zero length, which is the second NGTH. Else one of the tests failed. If one of the two conditions didn't satisfy, then we are going to print this line, close. Yes. The directory exists and the name is not zero length. Now let's change a little bit and rename this test to test again. So it should print else statement. One of the tests failed. Similarly, you can use or, and the sign is double pipe. So in this case, if either of the conditions satisfies, this will execute. If not, it will execute, right? So let's change the message a little bit. One of the conditions or both conditions satisfied, because it will execute if one condition satisfied or both, because it's or. And if both conditions failed, then only it's gonna print this one. One of the conditions or both conditions satisfied. Let's change name to test. Still gonna be true. So this is simple shell script, and this is our chapter 2. I'm gonna continue creating more chapters for shell scripting in the future, and I'll assign into the playlist, so it'll be easier for you to find out all the shell scripting in one place. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.